Am I wrong for not buying my fiance a second wedding dress that's more than 50% of the total budget? My 49 female, fiance 32 female, wants me to buy her a new wedding dress that's over 50% the total wedding budget after I already bought her a $8,600 dress. I'm marrying the love of my life who is a member of a Native American tribe and lives on a reservation in my city. I was involved with this tribe before I met her, buying an older woman a mobile home to put on her land when her daughter went to prison, leaving her 3 grandkids to raise when she was living in a 15-foot travel trailer. She managed to get the kids out of foster care due to this. This greased the wheels to get the council to approve us having our wedding on the reservation. I'm paying for everything and have a $60,000 budget. There will be traditional dancers, drummers, and a traditional feast, all catered by women on the reservation. We have an 80-person guest list. The only people coming on my side is my mother and my adult nephew. Yes, I'm spending my money around on the reservation, trying not to be obnoxious about it. Like I've said, I've seen the poverty many of them go through, and I love that my wedding is bringing money there. My fiance said she dreamed of her wedding since she was a little girl. I could care less about weddings, to be honest, so I've let her be the only bride. I'm going to wear a black gown with tuxedo elements on top to kind of stand in as a groom. This way, all of the attention will be on her. My only rule was that the budget was $60,000 firm, not a penny more. And I hired a wedding planner she had to work with to get everything within that budget. She went out with her girlfriends and decided on a beautiful $8,600 dress. She loved it. It was purchased and fitted great. It's 3 months until the wedding. We're doing November because it's way too hot to have a summer wedding out here. She was continuing to get things ready with the tribe and the planner. One of the tribal elders brought up her dress. He said she should wear a traditional tribal gown made by one of their artisans. She sat me down to tell me something serious and explained that she couldn't wear the gown she bought. She needed a traditional tribal gown. I said to get a quote from the artisan and maybe we could get a partial return and or sell the other gown to cover it. The artisan's price was $33,000. It's going to be covered with beadwork and she needs to get started now. I said, well, it's a good thing we already have a gown. She said she would not humiliate herself and dishonor her tribe by wearing the wrong gown. I said I can't approve this cost. It would throw the budget out of the window. She says I have millions of dollars and this is our wedding and I'm being ridiculous. Yes, I have money. I live off 4% as someone semi-retired. I have this money because I keep to the budgets I set. Now she's not talking to me except to remind me every day that if the artisan doesn't start now, she won't have a dress. I don't know what to do. Am I being the asshole here? There's a little edit because she says, I've noticed some confusion and just wanted to clear something up. The elder isn't saying she's required to wear the dress. There have been other weddings with non-traditional dresses like her mother's wedding. The elder just suggested that since this is planning out to be such a big event for the tribe, it would be appropriate for her to wear a traditional dress. This is part of why I'm saying that it's still an option for her to wear the original dress.
My 33 male, wife 30 female, and her family are obsessed with the idea that if her older sister was alive, I would be with her instead. I'm worried about her. How can I help? My wife and I, 33 male, have been married for almost 2 years now, and we have a little baby boy. I love my wife more than my own life, and I believe that in any lifetime I would still find her and fall in love with her. My wife had an older sister, Mia, that passed away at 11 months old from a landslide collapsing on their home. She died before my wife was born. They're the only 2 daughters in a family of boys. When I met her family for the first time, everyone was nice, but it got weird when all they would talk about was their late daughter. My mother-in-law even showed me photo albums of Mia, which took about 2 hours to get through. I never thought anything of it, and then as much as I loved getting to know my wife's family, I would be more interested in seeing baby photos of my wife, but I just brushed it off. At dinner, they wouldn't stop talking about how if Mia was alive, she would be smarter or even prettier than my wife. I would look at my wife when they said those things, but she would just agree with them. When we got married, the whole process was filled with, Mia would love this. Mia would look great in this. Mia would be more buxom than, wife's name, her grandma. My wife would nod and agree each time they said something like this, that even my mother felt something was wrong. I talked to her before about this and she said, I know she's barely lived, but I know if she was alive, she would be so beautiful and smart. I know deep down if you met her, you would love her and not me. I had to trick her to get her into therapy because something was definitely wrong and maybe she was brainwashed. Life was great for 2 years since we moved 8 hours away from my in-laws for my job, but since my brother-in-law just got engaged, my wife is involved in planning. And just like they did at our wedding, they wanted to plan a memorial for Mia, which is totally fine, except that they weren't including her grandparents that had recently died. lived full lives and gave them a hefty amount of inheritance. It wasn't my place, so I remained quiet, but now my wife started to say those self-deprecating things about her in comparison to Mia again. During the engagement party, everybody was gushing over my son about how cute he was and that thank God he took after me. My wife has brown eyes and I have blue eyes. My boy has got the biggest brown eyes that makes me want to stare into them for hours. Yet her mom said, it's a shame he didn't get your blue eyes, though. If this was Mia's child, he would definitely have blue eyes too, since hers were blue. And it took all of me to not roll my eyes, but I just said, my wife has the most beautiful eyes I've ever seen, and I thank God every day that my son has them. She took that as an awe moment and said, if Mia was alive, I'm sure she would be holding her baby with you now. You would love her very much. I wanted to freaking shout at her, but I always reminded myself that people grieve differently, and as long as they need to. But I'm pissed that she keeps her dead daughter on a pedestal, but ignores and belittles her living, breathing one. Edit to add, my wife has been in individual therapy for more than 2 years, but she cut back on some hours after we moved since she felt a lot better. I always tell my wife that I would always choose her and that she deserves even better than me. My wife's 2 younger brothers that were born after Mia's passing also feel weird about the Mia comments, but often kept quiet about it because when they would defend my wife when they were younger, my mother-in-law would get emotional and go on a hunger strike. Both of my younger brother-in-laws were never compared to Mia.
Hugh Hefner himself spoke out about her death shortly after. He said, quote, there is still a great tendency for this thing to fall into the classic cliche of small town girl comes to Hollywood, life in the fast lane, and that's somehow related to her death. That's not what happened. A very sick guy saw his meal ticket and his connection to power slipping away, and that was what made him kill her. Dorothy Stratten was born in Vancouver, Canada. Her father was Simon and her mother was Nellie. Dorothy was the oldest of 3. She had a little sister and a little brother. When Dorothy was around 17 years old, she was in high school and she had a part-time job at a Dairy Queen. In 1977, while she was working, in enters Paul Snyder, wearing a big fur coat through those Dairy Queen doors. Paul Snyder at the time was 26 years old. He was a local club promoter in the area. As soon as Dorothy saw him, she was flustered. She thought he was really handsome and quite charming. And pretty much as soon as Paul started talking to her, she was swept off her feet. Paul felt the exact same way about her. He was flirty, he was sweet, he was kind, and he asked her out on a date. Very quickly, the two start dating, and Dorothy's parents, they wanted to be happy for her, but in her eyes, Dorothy was making that almost impossible for them because in their eyes, the 9-year age gap between Dorothy and Paul was a disaster waiting to happen. However, Paul worked hard to get their approval. He wanted them to like him, of course. He turned on his charismatic personality until eventually they did like him. Dorothy and Paul keep dating. They're very happy. They're getting closer when Paul tells Dorothy that he isn't just a club promoter. He is also a scout for Bunny magazine. Dorothy thought it was odd, but she was like, all right, as long as you are loyal to me, that's fine. Paul asks her if she's ever thought about modeling. Dorothy at this stage in her life was a very good girl. Modeling was way out of her comfort zone, let alone modeling for magazines such as that one. Paul tells her, however, that there's something so different about her, that she has the kind of beauty and charm that is so unique and grand, and that he has never seen someone that had such potential to be so successful in that career. They keep talking about it. Paul tells her that she has everything that she needs to be successful with. He tells her about what it would entail and how she would be perfect for all of the things, selling her a dream of what kind of life she could have. At first, Dorothy thought, absolutely not, I'm not that kind of girl, not for me. But the more that Paul kept talking about it, the more that she started to consider it, until she eventually agreed. Paul was so excited, he told Dorothy not to worry about a thing, he would take care of everything for her, and then he scheduled her first photo shoot. Dorothy's first photo shoot was with very minimal clothing, and before she was really nervous about it because it was so unlike her, but afterwards she thought it was awesome. She had this newfound confidence and she felt amazing about herself. In the summer of 1978, Paul Snyder sends those pictures to Playboy magazine. Because Dorothy was only 18 years old, the legal age where she lived was 19, her mother had to sign the modeling form for her, which she did, and the pictures were sent off to the magazine and they fell in love. They wanted her immediately on the next plane out to the mansion. In August of 1978, Dorothy moves to LA to pursue this career. By June of 1979, Dorothy and Paul are married. Shortly after, Dorothy moves into the mansion. And Dorothy was absolutely loved and obsessed over from day one in the mansion. I believe she was the youngest bunny living in the house. You might have to double check me on that though. Now let's talk about the mansion. The mansion where Hugh Hefner, who was the founder of the magazine, lived. It was a location for the most extravagant parties. The bunnies who lived in the mansion would get $1,000 a week of spending money, which would be equivalent to $4,000 in today's money. But if they misbehaved, their weekly allowance would be cut. They obviously didn't have to pay for any bills. If they wanted any sort of plastic surgery, Hugh Hefner would pay for it. There were rules that the bunnies had to follow. They had a 9 p.m. curfew. They had a uniform that they had to wear, including a bunny tail and bunny ears, which if you think about it, what the fuck? They had to be wearing heels at all times, and this was strict. Hugh Hefner wanted them to look a certain way. He wanted them in that specific outfit, and they would have surprise inspections where they would inspect everything about them, right? Including their outfits, their nail polish, and everything about their appearance. They also had weigh-ins. They would weigh them to see if they had gained any weight, which is wicked, foul, disgusting, messed up, offensive, and wrong. But anyway, if it was not up to par, their allowance would again be cut. One last crazy fact about the mansion is that when a new girl would join, she wanted to become a bunny, Hugh Hefner would take her in a room along with some of his friends. They would take a picture of the girl and they would give her a number from 1 to 3 without any context, but we know now from a past bunny that apparently that number was to rate the girl's physical appearance. 1 was perfect, 2 was and 3 was get her out of here. This is the house that Dorothy would be moving into, the environment that she would be surrounded with. Think fame, money, parties, and all the things. Dorothy is quickly becoming the next big bunny, everyone's favorite. They loved her, they admired her, and Hugh Hefner envisioned so much for her. And she was so busy with this new life. She was at photo shoots, traveling to go to photo shoots. And it was during these photo shoots that people that she worked with, her new friends, started to see how much control Paul Snider, her husband, had over Dorothy. She was always telling him exactly what she was doing, who she was with, but it was like she was checking in too much, almost as if she was required to check in with him to make sure that he was aware of her every move. It was odd enough for the girls around her to be like, what is going on? Another person that was not a fan of Paul Snider was Hugh Hefner himself. But the point of view that Dorothy had was that she owed something to Snider because he was the one that recruited her. Without him, she would not have been introduced to this new life. So in her eyes, she had to do whatever he asked of her because she had him to thank for this new career. At this point, by the way, Snider is still living in Canada. So they were doing long distance until he decided that he could not bear to be apart from his wife any longer. He got up, packed his stuff, moved to LA. Dorothy had been there since August. Now it's October and Snider has joined her. However, for whatever reason, Snider was not able to get a work visa, only a travels visa, so he couldn't work. So he flew to LA. Him and Dorothy bought a house, and while her career was booming by the minute, I guess Paul just thought, okay, cool, I'll just stay at home. I'll hang out, you go make us money, and then we can split your money because I will be making $0. And Dorothy was happy to help him. I think she was just thinking this was her way of paying him back for introducing her to this new life that she was now loving. As her career started growing, Dorothy expressed her interest in acting, being an actress, and that dream of hers was very supported by all the other bunnies and by Hugh Hefner himself. All of the people living in the house with her had their own connections. Everyone knew someone that could help Dorothy's foot get in the door. Hugh Hefner was so supportive, he knew plenty of people to make this dream come true for Dorothy. She starts booking some acting jobs in movies, and if you can't tell where this is going, Paul Snider started to grow very, very jealous. He has this beautiful wife. Her career is taken off not only in modeling but also now in acting. She is widely successful and loved by so many, and it doesn't seem like that success is going to be slowing down anytime. And then you have Paul Snider, who is not known by anyone at all in LA because he just moved there from Canada. He has no reputation. Nobody knows who he is. He's out of a job. He's out of money, and that doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon either. And instead of him being proud and happy for his wife and celebrating her successes with her, he was growing angry. He was jealous. He was bitter. By the way, this was very noticeable to everyone around. Hugh Hefner himself could see how jealous and bitter Snider was. He even warned Dorothy about him. He told her to leave him, and he banned Snider from the mansion because his demeanor was just very desperate. He was really obviously very thirsty for attention. 1980, Dorothy Stratten wins Playmate of the Year. Later that year, she landed a lead role in a movie that was going to be filmed in California. She was over the moon about it. Shortly after, she booked another role in a movie that was going to be filmed in New York. The writer and the director of that movie was Peter Bogdanovich. And while Paul is at home in LA, Dorothy is in New York. She's filming that movie. And it wasn't too long before she started building a romantic relationship with Peter. Peter was really good friends with Hugh Hefner, and Hugh absolutely loved Peter for Dorothy because he was kind, he was good, he was successful. He respected Dorothy, and in Hefner's eyes, and maybe a little bit too now in Dorothy's eyes, Peter was everything that Paul was not. Dorothy ends up flying back to LA for an award ceremony. After the ceremony, she has plans to go on tour. She's going to be touring all around Canada, which is where she's from, which was perfect. She could do her tour all over Canada, and then she would book a week off at the end to spend time with her entire family. Well, while she was on tour, she started really missing the man that she loved. But she realized the man that she loved, the man who she could not stop thinking about, the man that she really, really missed was Peter. It was not Paul. It was not her husband. And she realized then and there that it was over with Paul. She had the realization of how jealous and controlling he was, and she didn't want to deal with it anymore. So Dorothy Stratten writes an email to Paul Snider, and she tells him that she needs some space. Paul Snider freaks out, loses it. He tells her that he has always had a feeling about her and Peter. He saw this coming, that he could tell that they had a thing, and now she's asking for space, and he lost his head. He couldn't take it. Now we are in June of 1980. Dorothy Stratten writes a letter to Paul Snider saying, "This is done. Our marriage is over. You can no longer have any of my money. I'm done supporting you. Everything ends today. Snyder's first reaction to this letter was to go to the bank and drain all of their shared bank accounts. He takes all that money and puts it to his own bank account. He then uses all of that money, which was a lot, to hire a private investigator. He wanted to get proof that Dorothy left him for Peter. And it just keeps getting worse. He takes it one step further every time. Meanwhile, Dorothy is back in New York. She's filming that movie with Peter. She's falling in love. And Snyder is in LA, still bitter, selling everything in their house, any belongings of Dorothy's, all of her awards, her car. He was stopping at nothing. Once Dorothy and Peter are done filming the movie in New York, they're getting ready to go back to LA. And Peter asks her to move in with him, his big, beautiful mansion in Bel Air. And Dorothy says yes. She's so excited. But soon, Paul Snyder hears that Dorothy is back in LA and he's fuming. A week into her being back, she stops at their house to pick up some of her stuff because she thought that Snyder was out and about, but he wasn't. He was home. As soon as he saw her, he dropped to his knees begging for her to come home, begging for her to take him back, begging for a chance to fix their marriage. He was literally on his knees begging. And Dorothy says, first of all, get up. Second of all, chill out. I don't like you anymore. But they agree that they need more time. They need to take a moment. So they agreed that on August 14th of 1980, Dorothy would go back to the house and they would be able to sit down, have a mature conversation about the divorce. It would be better that way once they both had time to chill out. Now it's August 14th. It's around noon and Dorothy is getting ready to go talk to Paul at his house. She brings cash with her and she's planning to leave that cash with Paul to give it to him so that he could use as a down payment for him to get a new house. At 8 p.m. that night, Paul's roommates get home. They were aware of the chat that was scheduled between Dorothy and Snyder. I'm sure because that's probably all that Paul ever talked about. They get home at 8 p.m. They see Dorothy's car in the driveway and they think, this is great. Their chat is probably going so well because she's still here, which is a great sign. They walk inside. It's dead quiet. Paul Snyder's bedroom door is closed. The two roommates just assume that they're in there and they just go to their separate rooms, whatever. Later that night, Paul's private investigator calls the house. His private investigator had quickly became one of Paul's best friends. One of the roommates answers the phone and the investigator says, hey, I'm Paul's private investigator. I know that he was going to meet up with Dorothy. I have not been able to get a hold of him. I want to talk to him. I want to know how the chat went. And the more that the private investigator and the roommates start talking, the more they start to grow concerned because they both mentioned that Paul was desperate to get Dorothy back, that he was becoming a little bit too obsessive. And they both also mentioned that Paul Snyder had recently been talking a lot about weapons. The PI tells the roommates that a couple days prior, Paul had invited him to go shopping for a weapon that he wanted for home protection. The roommates then tell the PI that the night before, Paul showed them this new weapon that he had just bought. He was showing it off. And that's when everything starts to click and they think, oh. But for whatever reason, they think, well, let's just wait and see. They don't think, oh, the bedroom is shut. We have not heard anything. They both might be dead in there. We should probably check. Oh, that's not what they think. Or maybe they do think that. But for whatever reason, they decide, let's just give them a little bit more time. It's 11 p.m. now. 3 hours have passed. Finally, the roommates go knock on Paul's door. Nobody answers and they push it open a little bit. And they are met with the most horrific crime scene. Paul Snyder and Dorothy Stratten were both lying on the floor, no longer alive, with clear wounds to their head. Paul Snyder's body was lying right on top of his new weapon, clearly the murder weapon. Police and paramedics get there as fast as they can. The autopsy revealed that 20-year-old Dorothy Stratten had been in that room lifeless since around 1 p.m. that day, less than 1 hour after she arrived at that house to have that conversation with Paul. It is believed that as soon as Dorothy got there, Paul threw himself onto her, he SA'd her, killed her, and then SA'd her again. From the blood at the crime scene, investigators think that Paul ended Dorothy's life and then walked around a little bit trying to figure out what to do, and then finally decided to unalive himself. Authorities informed Hugh Hefner directly of the death of Dorothy Stratten, and he was very upset. He called Peter himself to tell him the news, and Peter was heartbroken. I mean, he was so upset he had to be medically sedated because he physically couldn't deal with the news. It was too much for him. Yeah, terrible.
I got my bratty little stepsister suspended from school, and now my entire family's not talking to me. For context, my bratty little stepsister is the absolute worst person I've ever met in my entire life. She's entitled, she's rude, she tries to take the easy way out of everything, but for some reason, my dad and my stepmom treat her like she is God's gift to the earth. She's also a huge pathological liar. Like, she lies about the dumbest things ever, just like random achievements to make herself seem cooler or better than she is. I don't know. Comes from insecurity, obviously. When I was growing up, I would get in trouble for literally everything. If I forgot to clean my room, I don't have a life for 2 weeks. I'm grounded. But she can talk back to anybody. She can be rude. She can skip school. She can do anything. And it's just a little slap on the wrist. She's just learning. She's growing up, okay? She'll be better when she's older. And because she never gets in trouble for anything, she has learned absolutely no responsibility. And she's just The worst. Like, she is the worst. I don't even know how else to describe it other than this girl is just horrible. And one of the things that my dad and my stepmom constantly boast about her is how smart she is and how well she does in school and how she just works so much harder. They have no idea how she does. I've literally never seen this girl study. So I was like, how can she be doing well in school if the girl never studies? Well, I figured it out. Last week, I was at family dinner, and of course, the conversation reverted to being all about my bratty little stepsister and all of her accomplishments. Specifically, my stepmom was bragging about how amazing the essay she just wrote was for school on The Catcher in the Rye. And listen, as much as my bratty little stepsister annoys me, I do try to be nice. So I was asking her, what did you write your essay on? You know, trying to bond with her, but she was being really evasive about the whole thing, which is not like her. She is the first person to brag about anything she does. And that's when my dad says, you know what? I have a copy of it. Let's pull it out and Kelsey will read it. She'll be so impressed. And my bratty little stepsister starts to lose it. She's like, no, I don't want Kelsey to read it. It's none of her business. It's freaking out. Something was suspicious. So after dinner, when everybody was in the living room watching TV, I decided to do some sleuthing. I knew the cabinet that my dad kept all of my bratty little stepsister's accomplishments in, right in front of the little folder in the back that had all of my accomplishments. Now, this folder contains everything from awards to, essays or school assignments that we did really well on, things like that. So I open up my bratty little stepsister's folder, and right on top, there's her The Catcher in the Rye essay, and it looks oddly familiar. It was a word-for-word duplicate of the essay I wrote of The Catcher in the Rye in high school. Yes, she took my essay. She went into the folder of all my accomplishments at the very back of the cabinet, found the essay, and completely copy-pasted it. Just changed the name. Even worse, I start going through the rest of her essays that my dad had saved, and every single one of her English essays, they were mine. They were plagiarism. So I gather all my evidence, I gather all my essays and her copied essays, and I march right into the living room and say, okay, everybody, we have some things to discuss. And when I lay out the matching copy-pasted essays side by side, it looks like my bratty little stepsister is about to projectile vomit everywhere. She knows that she got caught, and I was like, finally, maybe there will be some accountability and she'll actually get in trouble. But surprise, surprise, that's not what happened. My dad is silent for a few minutes, is looking at what's in front of him, finally looks at my bratty little stepsister and says, you know what? You're being efficient. I get it. You're so busy. When I attempt to try and argue, my dad just shuts me down and is like, you know what, Kels? She's in so many AP classes, and if she would have taken the time, she probably could have written an even better essay than this. Like, what? Why are you coming at me in my essays? What did I do? Also, I'm still not sure how my dad didn't realize this earlier, that she was doing this, because he has read all of those essays before. Clearly, he never actually read them. Clearly, he never actually read my essays. And just like that, like nothing even happened, my dad unpauses the movie they were watching and goes back to it. This has to be a dream. This is absolutely insane. My bratty little stepsister looks at me and gives me the most smug little smirk I've ever seen. I think even she was shocked she got away with this one. And call me petty all you want, but the next day, I marched myself right down to my bratty little stepsister's school, right into the office, and asked to speak with the principal, because I knew he was going to care a lot more than my dad and my stepmom would. And boy, was I right about that one, because the next day I got a very angry phone call from my dad telling me that not only was my bratty little stepsister suspended from school, but they went back and gave her a 0 on every single one of her copied essays. So she's heavily failing English. My dad and my stepmom are beyond furious with me and are refusing to speak to me. They say they cannot believe that I did this, that I ruined my bratty little stepsister's life. No, I really don't think I did. I think that I'm teaching her accountability so that she won't continue to do these things in the future, because maybe my parents were letting her get away with it, but yeah, as she gets older and she's an adult, she's not going to get the same treatment. Also, these essays were my work. They're things that I spent a ton of time on in high school, perfecting and working really hard on to make sure I got a good grade. And she just took them. Again, By not getting in trouble, she's learning that she can just use people and take the easy way out and cheat her way to success. That's not how the world works, baby. I do feel a little guilty because, yeah, it's going to be on her permanent record and it is going to affect her when she applies to colleges. But also, that's not my fault. That's her fault. It's also my parents' fault for allowing her to get away with this kind of behavior for years. But my dad is so angry with me. I'm starting to think he may never speak to me again after this.
Am I the arsehole for tricking my parents into missing my wedding? Story time. A little context to the situation here. I have an older brother who we'll call Steve. Steve is very clearly the favourite of my family. He is 32 and the definition of a mummy's boy. The only thing my brother is good at is playing football. My parents would miss all sorts of things so that they could go to Steve's games, miss my graduation, they missed many of my school shows. I was told that I wasn't allowed to go to uni because my uni fund was used on Steve. You get the family dynamic. The only person in my family that gave two shits about me was my granddad. So I ended up moving away and I actually did self-fund my uni journey and I met my husband. After being together for 3 years, he proposed. And when I was so excited to tell my parents, they dismissed it with a, "That's nice." I was dead set against not inviting my parents, but Dave convinced me that it would be wrong not to have them there. However, they never ever responded to my invite. When I would talk about the upcoming wedding, my mum would talk over me and tell me about Steve's accomplishments. But one time I went to visit them, I got fed up of them not acknowledging the wedding. I told her I was hosting an event that I really wanted my parents to be at and the date could not be changed. She told me that they wouldn't be able to attend. At this point, I told them that it wasn't a problem if they couldn't come. Fast forward to a few weeks ago, I got married. My granddad walked me down the aisle. We literally had the best day. I had so many members of my family ask where my mum and dad were, and I just told them that they were at my brother's football game. Straight after our reception, me and Dave headed off on our honeymoon. It was a phone-free situation. Once we got back, we discovered an absolute shitstorm had occurred. A literal storm of notifications popped through, most of them from my mum and Steve. Basically, one of my aunts had put on Facebook the pictures from the wedding and captioned it with a blatant dig at my mum. And apparently, my 95-year-old granddad went over to my parents' house and went on an absolute tirade at my parents. It got to the point, apparently, when my dad was in tears. This, apparently, was my dad's breaking point. He was so distraught that he missed my wedding, his only daughter's wedding, that he was threatening my mum with divorce. Whoa, slay. Well, I don't know how to move forward from this situation. Family members who I didn't even invite to the wedding have been reaching out to me saying that they're so sorry this has happened and if they can support me in any way they will. But my mum's sisters and all of her friends are belittling me, saying that this is all my fault. Apparently my mum is inconsolable at the thought of missing my wedding. Yeah, well, Susan, you should have been such a bitch, should you? My aunts are calling me an arsehole because I've denied my mum the chance to see her only daughter get married. So what do you think? Am I wrong here?
Am I the asshole for calling my girlfriend a dumbass and taking away her key after she almost burned my house down? My girlfriend wanted a pizza, and I have really good frozen pizzas from the local Italian market. They are made fresh, and if you do them on a pizza stone, they come out perfect. I have made pizza for us many times. It is a simple process. You take the pizza stone, put it in the oven, let the oven preheat, put the pizza on the paddle, and slide it onto the hot stone. Once it's ready, you slide the paddle under the pizza and pull it out. Put it on the carving board and cut it. Easy, right? Nope. My pizza stone was dirty. It is scorched, not dirty. So her brilliant idea was to make the pizza on my plastic cutting board. Because that way, she could just take the cutting board out with the oven mitts and cut the pizza without having to use all of the tools. I got home to see black smoke coming out of my house and my girlfriend on the phone with 911. My dog is not on his leash and he's going crazy. I go to the front door to see if it's hot in the house or if I can see flames. No flames, no heat. I get to the stove and turn it off. I open the sliding door to let out more smoke and get my leash on the way out. The firefighters are there within 5 minutes and the smoke is already dissipating. They go in to make sure everything is good. All clear. Thank God they were there less than an hour. It is covered by the city then. If it was over an hour, I would have been charged for their response. My oven is fucked though, and I have a lot of smoke damage to clean up. I told my girlfriend I was glad she was okay, but that she is a dumbass and she wasn't allowed in my house alone for a while. I took her key away. We do not live together, but she has roommates and likes having a big house to herself on her days off. She says that it's a mistake anyone could make and that I'm an asshole for calling her names. Yes, she said those words. She says it's my fault for not just getting microwavable pizza and having to eat the fancy stuff. So, am I the asshole?